In this lesson, we're going to continue our discussion of intent in intentional torts. Specifically, we're going to focus on the transferred intent doctrine, the mistake doctrine, and kind of how insanity and infancy play into the analysis. But we can go ahead and just jump right into it, starting with the transferred intent doctrine. Here, under the transferred intent doctrine, if the defendant intends to commit the intentional tort of battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, or trespass to chattels, but his acts instead or in addition result in any of the other 5 intentional torts, the defendant is liable even though he did not intend to commit the other tort. Okay, so the main takeaway from that, and I know it's a mouthful, is just understanding that the transferred intent doctrine, everything we're about to talk about, only applies to these 5 intentional torts: battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, and trespass to chattels. If we're dealing with anything else, intentional infliction of emotional distress or conversion, any other intentional tort that's not battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, or trespass to chattels, then the transferred intent doctrine does not apply. Okay, so that's kind of our first starting point rule. We need to understand that the transferred intent doctrine only applies to these specific 5 intentional torts. Okay, but under the transferred intent doctrine, there's really only 3 possible ways that the defendant is going to be liable, right? And we have them listed up here on the board. Number 1, if the defendant intends to commit a battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, or trespass to chattel against one person, but instead commits a different tort against that person. Okay, we kind of have each of these drawn up on the board. So what would this look like? And by the way, the transferred intent doctrine, the easiest way to kind of understand this is just to work through examples. So we'll just work through some different examples we have drawn up here on the board, and hopefully this will become clear as we just work through some hypos. Okay, but starting with this first way a defendant can be liable under the transferred intent doctrine. Here, imagine that we have a defendant who intends to commit an assault against one person, right? The intentional tort of assault, right? And we know that an assault, or by the way, we're going to get into all of these intentional torts in way more detail. We're going to go over the elements of battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, and trespass to chattels. We're going to go over each of these torts individually in a lot more detail. So I'm just going to kind of focus on the big picture idea to illustrate these examples, right? But big picture, an assault is going to require an act by the defendant that creates a reasonable apprehension in the plaintiff of immediate harmful or offensive contact, right? And we know a battery requires an act by the defendant which actually does bring about that harmful or offensive contact. So for all of these examples, we can kind of use battery and assault because they kind of go hand in hand, and it'll be easy to illustrate this concept of transferred intent. But big picture, if we're thinking about the difference between a battery and an assault, right, a battery really does require contact. We need harmful or offensive contact. The defendant has to engage in some act that actually brings about that physical contact to the plaintiff's person, which results in, harm or offensive contact, right? Assault is going to be different in that there is no contact, right? An assault is where contact almost happens, but it doesn't, right? And the plaintiff experiences reasonable apprehension. So classically, imagine that a defendant comes with a baseball bat, right? And the defendant wants to really scare the plaintiff. So the defendant takes the baseball bat and they fake like they're going to hit the plaintiff with the baseball bat really hard. So they wind up and they're about to hit the plaintiff, but at the last second they kind of stop, right? They don't actually do it. But let's say that plaintiff experiences apprehension, real this real reasonable apprehension of almost being hit by this baseball bat, right? They're expecting to get hit by this baseball bat, so they experience this apprehension, and say it results in a heart attack, right? And the plaintiff goes to the hospital and has medical bills, so they want to sue for the intentional tort of assault, right? They couldn't sue for battery because that contact wasn't made. Remember, a battery requires harmful or offensive contact, right? We actually need the physical contact. So because no physical contact was made, plaintiff isn't going to be able to recover for the intentional tort of battery, but they'd have a really good case for assault, okay? Of course, if exact same fact pattern, except this time our defendant takes the baseball bat and actually hits the plaintiff, resulting in a broken arm, that's just garden variety intentional tort battery. Okay, so that's kind of what battery and assault look like. Now let's apply the transferred intent doctrine between these and see how it plays out. So let's say our defendant intends to commit an assault against the plaintiff. So same thing, defendant wants to scare our plaintiff. So the defendant takes the baseball bat and he goes up to the plaintiff and he winds up to hit the plaintiff, and he intends to just scare the plaintiff. He doesn't actually want to hit the plaintiff. He doesn't want to cause physical harm to the plaintiff. His only intent is to scare the plaintiff, to cause reasonable apprehension in the plaintiff, a fear of almost getting hit by the baseball bat. So our defendant winds up with this intent to commit an assault, but say he messes up, right? And as he swings the bat, he actually hits the plaintiff. He makes physical contact. Well, in that fact pattern, the defendant intended to commit an assault against the plaintiff, but instead the defendant actually commits a battery against the plaintiff. The question is, can the defendant be liable to the plaintiff for battery even though he didn't have the intent to commit a battery? He had the intent to commit an assault. Remember, the intent to commit a battery in intentional torts, we either have to have specific intent or general intent. And there, the defendant could say, look, I didn't have the specific intent to bring about harmful or offensive contact. I didn't have the general intent. I wasn't substantially certain that faking like I was going to hit someone with a baseball bat was going to result in harmful or offensive contact. So our defendant doesn't have the specific intent or general intent to commit a battery. Instead, the defendant had the intent to commit an assault, right? He wanted to bring about this apprehension in the plaintiff, right? When he's winding up with the baseball bat, faking like he's going to hit the plaintiff, he's doing so with the intent to scare the plaintiff, to bring about reasonable apprehension in the plaintiff, not to actually bring about harmful or offensive contact. Well, under the transferred intent doctrine, we can transfer this intent to commit an assault to the tort that was actually committed, which was the battery. And we can say, look, even though the defendant here did not have the intent to commit this battery against the plaintiff, he did have the intent to commit assault against the plaintiff, and we can transfer the intent from the assault to the battery to find the defendant liable for this battery. Okay, even though the defendant didn't have the intent to commit a battery, because the defendant didn't have the intent to bring about that harmful or offensive contact, he didn't want to have any contact at all. His intent was just to scare this person. He didn't want to actually hit them, but he messes up and swings a little too far and makes the contact. He can't get out of this battery liability based on lack of intent, because we can transfer the intent of the assault to the battery. Okay, so that's the first way a defendant could be liable under the transferred intent doctrine. The next way is where the defendant intends to commit a battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, trespass to chattel against one person, but instead commits the same tort against a different person. Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP, for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.